And the next couple slides kind of show how they relate to each other. And we're going to show two versions. And this first version shows a slightly different tool mix. It shows NuGet as our package manager. It shows TeamCity as our build server, and it shows Octopus Deploy as our deployment server, and it shows Bitbucket as a Git host. So you can put different tools together, but architecturally it's the same. And I understand the text is really small. That's not the point. By the way, um, uh, if anyone's interested in a high resolution PDF of these architectural diagrams that we're showing, these are part of some larger posters that are really meant for print shop. They're really high resolution when you get them. If you want copies of those, just put it in the chat and we can get those to you. But I just want to breeze through the relationship between these things. We start with the private build on the local workstation, and then we do the integration build in TeamCity, and then in NuGet, we store the release candidate packages, whether it's NuGet packages for a few compute components, and then you have your migration project for SQL Server, or whether you've gone containers and you need to push them to an Azure Container Registry. But either way, you end up with something that is deployable and deployable artifacts. Now we get to a series of environments, and there are three distinct types of environments, and you need at least one of each. Okay. Now, many teams have much more than just three, but there's three canonical types. The first one is production. We all understand that. Our customers use it. You need at least one production environment. And in some cases, you'll have multiple production environments. If you stand them up for different customers or for different regions, you need at least one. Backing off from production, we need some type of environment where a human can check something manually. Okay. And examples of this is a product management test environment, a UAT, user acceptance test environment, a staging environment, any number of things. But it's an environment where we're going to use it to test something, and it has a certain audience. But that's a category of environment. Pull back from that, the other category of environment is an automated test environment, or a test automation environment, and you need at least one of those. And so in your case, you may have multiple of each, but again, there are three canonical types of environments when you're deploying in your progression in your pipeline all along the way to production. And make sure that you have at least one environment where you can run completely automated test suites against a fully deployed instance of your entire system, and then an environment where people can check things out, and then of course your production environment. Let's go to the next slide, because it's the same DevOps architecture, but just with a little bit different tool mix, just to illustrate that the concepts really are the same. The shape of the DevOps environment has really become industry standard, and there's a lot of agreement on this throughout the industry. So this mix of tools uses Azure repos for the Git hosting, Azure pipelines for the build server, and the internal Azure pipelines package management, and Octopus Deploy for deployment. And it also uses Redgate's SQL change automation for deploying of the SQL Server changes, and some SQL mask and SQL clone. Redgate, provides some really good products as well for complex databases. But the shape of the DevOps environment is the same. We go through the same progression. And what's really important here, one of the mistakes that some people make is accidentally going back to the code when it's time to deploy to another environment. There's one rule of thumb. You want to build once and deploy many. You don't want to recompile your code and repackage your code just to deploy to the next environment. Our integration build has already created our release candidate artifacts, whatever that may be, appropriate to your application architecture. We already have those. We already know what build, 5.300. whatever means. And so we can take that exact same set of release candidate artifacts and deploy it to however many environments we have all the way to production. So it really is a linear fashion. We don't ever have to go back to source code to compile something new in order to deploy to the next environment. That's a really important rule of thumb. And we can go to the final slide on this.
Oops, there we go.
All right. Now, it's easy to talk about cloud in the form of just in the terms of Azure App Service or Container Service or SQL Server, and everything's server side, everything's cloud native. But we've had an explosion over the last decade in software programs that run on your handheld computer, your phone, your Android, your iOS, and also an explosion on programs that run on mini computers out there in a factory, the IoT revolution, and even retail locations that just have a small computer that is in every location. You have tons of deployment destinations, and architecturally, it's the same concept. Okay, and so in this example, we have some additional environments that we're deploying to. Whereas you can see under the Octopus logos, we are deploying an app to the Google Play Store. We're also deploying to the Apple iOS Store, and we're also deploying some things to Azure. And guess what? To keep that same example of our test automation environment, our manual test environment, and our production environment, well, yeah, we're gonna have a test automation version pushed to Google Play and to the Apple Store. Anyone who's done that knows that the test flight app for providing test environments for iOS apps. And then for production, guess what? Now we have our production submission to the Apple Store, our production submission to the Google Play Store. And there's command lines for pushing to those, just like everything else. And again, with Octopus, you never hit a brick wall. You can deploy any type of software to any environment exactly the way that we need it to happen. But architecturally, there's a finite set of distinct concepts. And so again, if our environment includes some part of the software, some bit of the code that needs to go to the Android store, that needs to go to Azure, that needs to go anywhere, that needs to go to an IoT device, that's fine. That's the shape of what it means to be our production environment. And then we needed one of those for manual testing purposes and one of those for test automation purposes. But architecturally, those are the concepts. So I know that's a lot, Rob, but I get excited about this stuff.
No, I think that's fantastic. And I think the key here, like it's interesting because if you think about the last three slides, the architecture is consistent. And I think that's one of the keys is that when you're tackling, when you're working in a modern cloud environment and you're trying to modernize, you're trying to improve one of these existing applications, having this foundation helps so much. And it's interesting because the types or the categories of environments, I've seen companies around the world they can have more than 3, they can have 5, they can have 6, multiple UAT. They have different ones for different purposes, but they all fit those same categories. And like it's that dev playground where it's integration, it's the automated test suite, and then so on, that environment for people to play with through to production. And again, we all we all know production, but it's that progression through the environments and the supporting component in a pipeline to get to that point that's important. So I know there was a lot you talked about a lot, but I think that it's very, very strong and compelling, and that's the foundation that can help you set you up for success.